Alright everyone, and so the new DC universe is finally here as Superman is officially released from James Gunn, and I have to say, as I think on it, and I think this is a brilliant movie with beautiful storytelling to kick off the new era, the new chapter of the brand new DC universe before we have moving forward. And so we're going into full spoiler territory as I'm about to give you my spoiler review, going over everything that happened in the movie from beginning to end, even talk about the ending and the post-credit scene, and talk about a little bit for what it means for the future of DC, and a lot to talk about right here for our brand new Superman. And so, if you're new, then be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, so you don't miss out on any future videos. But now, let's talk about going to full spoilers. And now, starting off here with my first takeaway from the movie, is that we already know that Superman already has his origin story for how he was sent from his Kryptonian parents to Earth, and that's how he becomes Superman, and how he goes to Metropolis and starts a relationship with Lois Lane, and that's how we see this type of identity, not only within Superman, but within the Clark Kent, the character himself, and that's what we mostly enjoy about an origin story. But within this movie, it is not an origin story. In fact, with James Gunn, for what he has stated, is that Superman is already established in the world of Metropolis and on Earth. And now, especially for how the film opens up, it kind of opens up like a Star Wars monologue, as you see in the beginning of the movie. It tells you the exact same reasoning of how Superman is established, and he was basically trying to stop a war. Like, I think that, especially as this happened like weeks ago, and you know that we see here in the opening minutes of the movie with Superman that is injured because he was just in a battle with Bravia that was trying to invade Metropolis, and that was being taken over by Lex Luthor, who is the villain of the movie. And now, it's especially with Superman that is injured and whistles for Crypto, the super dog, and he takes him to the fortress to be healed, and especially with the solar radiation that was going to cure him. But and even just with my take on Superman, for the way that he is debuted on screen, I thought it's really good. The way that David Corenswet is introduced to us as he is making his debut as this Kryptonian metahuman superhero known as Superman, and now. And just with how the fortress of Solitude looks, and the way that it looks in the source material, it looks very interesting to me. And we do know that he has to stop the battle, and even after that he is healed, and that he flies back to Metropolis to take down the Bravia. And especially as we get the introduction of Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor, as he is controlling the Bravia in order to take down a Superman. For how the rest of the battle goes down, as Bravia is trying to destroy Superman, he spins him around, and then he immediately tackles him and throwing him straight to the ground for where the civilians of Metropolis knows that he's being taken down. We get that transition over to Clark Kent and his life over at the Daily Planet, and that's where we meet Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen, and especially for how this Superman story is established. And I'm already really hooked, because even for how James Gunn wanted to establish this world of Superman as we know it, it is kind of really fascinating to me. And as we see Lex Luthor in a meeting with General Rick Flag and the council group, and he talks about metahumans on how he wants to destroy Superman, especially with the Barabian that try to take him on. If they see if Superman is a threat, and how he plans to expose to the world who he truly is by retrieving the entire Kryptonian message. And then we transition over to where Lois Lane wants to interview Clark Kent as Superman for his actions. And even with the reason as why Lois was interviewing Clark as Superman, because he went to Bravia to stop a threat that was hurting people, and he didn't consult with any authority, not even the president, so that's why it made him illegally not allowed to enter. So that's why with the country that is surrounding him, creating controversy around the hero, and that it perfectly explains the Hammer of Bravia that was in Metropolis waiting for Superman to show up, and that's how Lois thinks of like Superman's actions. One thing that I do want to point out is that for how they establish Clark Kent and Lois Lane in this universe without having it being like reintroduced, and that's what I really like. It's not do it over again like the same formula multiple times, but instead have this in a established world that we see right in front of our eyes. And of course, it has the James Gunn humor and the way that we see his work put to the screen. But in terms of with the theme and the tone, I think it kind of works well in this movie, considering that this is a brand new universe. I just kind of like it, the way that it is, and then we see Lois interviewing Clark as Superman, and with his actions done in Metropolis trying to stop an invasion, and especially for how Lois is taking it and for trying to speak to the government, because obviously with Clark, aka Superman, that he was sent to Earth, that Clark is that with Lois that she admits that he illegally entered a country, but even with Clark that like takes it to make sure that he is simply not a threat, because I think James Gunn has described Clark Kent that he is basically an immigrant because he's a Kryptonian sent down to Earth, and that's how like Clark is responding to Lois in this type of situation. For that type of response, how this interview goes along, it's gonna hurt their relationship, but it turns out like I think it's a pretty meaningful way if you look at it, considering for how much Lois looks at Clark for his actions as Superman, and just for how the way that they're willing to go with the story and to see how much it is progressed. And yes, it's a little fast-paced, like stuff being thrown at you, but it's just to tell you the simple story of Superman, and that's all it really is. And with Lex Luthor and his plan to expose Superman for who he really is to the world, and that he creates a diversion and goes down to Antarctica to retrieve the entire Kryptonian message that his parents left, because even though with the back half of that message was like static and like I couldn't get the rest of it because it was damaged, he manages to get the entire thing, especially with having the engineer by his side, and decides to abduct Crypto. And even with Superman that is in a battle with Eclipria, and gets together Mr. Terrific, Guy Gardner, and Hawkgirl, they want to establish this group known as the Justice Gang, and I think it's a really cool name, and that they help him take him down, and like just for how Superman's actions are being taken into account, but the way that he really sees the public for who he truly is, and the way that he takes flight and takes the creature down. And even with this one an action, a breathtaking scene that I absolutely love, and that is with Superman protecting a girl from flying debris from hitting her leg. And I think, as we've seen it in the marketing, for how Superman is around people, especially around kids, and I think it is perfectly well done, because I don't think we've had any other versions of Superman being treated like this established character before, if you know what I mean. And with the moment that causes every civilian in Metropolis to turn against Superman is when Luthor sets out to Superman to become a threat by retrieving the entire Kryptonian message from his parents, is with the first act that he's heard of his whole life. And with the second back half, that was damaged, and it was unsettling because where he was sent to Earth from Krypton, and that's what made everyone turn against him, because it was said that he was sent to conquer Earth and to kill people and to basically take over, and that's how people really see Superman. That we see Superman going back into the fortress, and that we see a Crypto being abducted, and we see Lex Luthor becoming this true like evil, menacing villain that is really trying to take over Superman and just to destroy him. And especially with the way that David Corenswet really packs a lot into this performance as his reaction to like where's Crypto, that he has to find him. And now, just with my personal take on just all of it for how the public has something against Superman, and we get a cameo from Peacemaker himself, and this is what happens when the world is exposed to Superman for what he truly is, with Luthor trying to make him a threat to everyone, for how Peacemaker is responding to the fact that Superman wants to conquer and destroy the world. That's what Luthor set him out to be, and that's why later we see in this conversation with Clark and Lois to what his choices mean, and if he wants to turn himself into the government and to have him being locked up. Even though like people see this as like a little bit of a copied version from Batman v Superman, but that's like a terrible movie. But as the way that we look at this story being unfolded, but I think with Superman, for how he handles this, is that he surrenders himself to the government being taken in, but with a red flag, that he hands over the custody of Superman to Lex Luthor. This is how James Gunn treats his take on the character perfectly. The public sees Superman reality as he wants to threaten and like destroy Earth and to destroy all of Metropolis. But I think at this point in reality, because I don't think that is true, and with how Superman sees this, that it's not a bad thing. But especially with him now being taken into prison by Lex Luthor, it just goes to show for how evil like he truly is, for how Lex Luthor really wants to destroy Earth and just to keep Superman out of it, and just from his Kryptonian heritage, from his transportation to Earth, for how he is raised by Jonathan and Martha Kent, just for his real parents. And in the second half of the movie, this is where we see Lex Luthor coming to full rise of power, considering for how much of a threat he is for imprisoning Superman into the Pocket universe, where we meet a Metamorpho who is a superhero in the comics, just for how he is treated. And that's where he's also keeping Crypto as the hostage, and for what he is doing to him, it is basically such painful, and it is so awful with the way how Superman is looking at Luthor for how he is treating Crypto for after abducting him from the fortress. And now, as we see Lois and Jimmy, for how they're gonna break Superman out of the Pocket universe, where he's being held by Luthor, and that they go digging for details and information, where Lois sends Jimmy into getting information out of Eve, who is Lex Luthor's girlfriend. And then with the way that they interact, it's sort of like flirting with each other, but hey, it's just to get details out of it. And with my take on Eve in this film, and compared to the 1978 movie, but in this film, she's clearly taking selfies and trying to date Jimmy Olsen. Even in the Richard Donner movie, and not all technology is formed in that era. But hey, I could take anything that they have, but I think for how Eve is treated like in this new modern era, it kind of speaks for itself. And even for how Skylar DeSando puts his energy and role into Jimmy Olsen, kind of like a nervous person, but he does really treat the character well, as like opposed to being a Superman's friend at the Daily Planet. And now, as we see Lois and Mr. Terrific go to rescue Superman from the Pocket universe, and the way that is being held through a giant Polaris territory, and this is where Luthor's back half of the plan unfolds to bring back a Bahamian back to invade Metropolis once again. And now within the J.L. Polaris compound, that's where the Pocket universe is being kept, and for how Luthor's prison is being unfolded to us. And now, as we see Superman suffer in the Pocket universe with Metamorpho, as he's being forced by Luthor to create a Kryptonianite to poison Superman and to make him feel worse. Even with Mr. Terrific and Lois and their operation mission is to save Superman, and honestly, I think it is a great, iconic superhero moment for the way that Superman feels for how he's gonna take down Luthor, and now he is suffering from so much damage being done to him by Luthor himself, for how the public sees him in like a different light. Just as we see the operation come to the rescue, that we see a Superman throw a powerful punch that breaks him out of prison. As we see Superman, Krypto, and Metamorpho trying to escape the Pocket Universe, and as we see a black hole being torn open, and as everything gets like sucked in, it's kind of like an outer space term that like threatens Earth. Like, just with this incredible action sequence alone, for the way that like James Gunn really wants to, tackle this other side of Superman for what he is really made of, and I just love this moment. And you with Krypto that almost gets sucked into the black hole, and with Superman that tries to close it, and luckily, just with Lois and Mr. Terrific, that they manage to rescue Superman out of the Pocket Universe, and just for how their open relationship is unfolded, and I can't believe that these two got their happy moment together, and that's what I really cherish and really admire about this movie, is that this is a well-established Superman. And also, with this detail and Easter egg that I definitely want to point out, is that when we see Clark the next morning with Krypto that is sitting on him, and we can see in his room a poster that reads "The Mighty Crab Joys." And now, especially as this is a fake in-universe band, but this is also a point to that is Clark's favorite boy band, and this was also seen in Creature Commandos when Eric Frankenstein was wearing a Mighty Crab Joys t-shirt when he was fighting Bride to make her fall in love with him, as we saw in that scene as they were going through time trying to fight each other. So it's especially with that project, that TV series Creature Commandos, that's also from James Gunn, and notice how it's in connectivity to James Gunn's Superman movie, so it kind of makes sense. And I think we saw a little bit in trailer footage for Peacemaker Season 2, and in which that is coming up next, and I love this connection of a boy band poster that is also a nod to the projects. And now, I want to talk about this beautiful, heartful moment, not only between Clark and his parents, but with the way that Lois sees him after taking him to see them, and even for how much he has suffered enough already after being injured and being poisoned, especially being in the prison of the Pocket Universe with Lex Luthor, and especially for how Lex Luthor's other half of his plan begins to be revealed as he plans to bring the Arabian back for a second invasion on Metropolis. And just with the beautiful message that this beautiful scene brings, especially between Clark and his dad, and even for what his dad tells him, is that his choices and his actions make him who you are, and that's such a beautiful moment. And not only does he bring to Clark, but it is a beautiful message basically in our entire reality, and with the way that Clark sees it, and his identity as Superman, and also as a Kryptonian too, as he faces as a metahuman, and with the way that the public sees him. And then as we see Clark and his parents look at the news broadcast as the second invasion begins in Metropolis, and then with Mr. Terrific that he comes to the rescue, and then with Superman that he goes back into battle in Metropolis, and with Lex Luthor's second Metropolis invasion begins, and the way that Bravia is responding to Lex Luthor working alongside authority, and the way that they are cheering for Superman as they want him to basically save the day. It's because he entered their country, and even though he took on a threat, but people cheered him for it. But now with Luthor's plan that continues on to not only destroy Earth, but destroy Bravia, and to destroy humanity as well, and to cause a rift. And now, as we see Superman entering a rageful, fierce final battle with Lex Luthor and his plan to tear open Metropolis by splitting it in half by creating a black hole in space. And then as we see everyone evacuating the city, as we see a building falling with all the debris about to crush this woman that is in her car, and then we see Superman that appears, and I think it's such a great way for his heroic activity to be unfolded here. I think I was like judging this with the way that other comic book movies that were revealing like third acts other movies, but I think this is somewhat different, and just with the way that he like saves people, and just for how the public is going to see him differently, especially what kind of actions that he has faced, knowing that he has to defeat Lex Luthor and to probably save Metropolis. And it's a special way of taking down the Engineer and Ultraman. And then, as we come to find out that with Ultraman, that it is revealed by Luthor that he created a clone of Superman to defeat him, and the same replica of the superhero. And I think it's pretty creative, or whatever the heck they decided to do, but I think it's pretty cool and epic. As we see the black hole that is nearing towards the city and wants to suck everything in, with Mr. Terrific, Lois, and Jimmy as they go to retrieve information about Lex Luthor of what he is really doing, if he is a traitor to the city, and even for that's what his plans really were, and to see people to turn their back against Superman because the world has a problem with him. And then, as we see Superman go in to confront Lex Luthor because he wants everyone to see like the world of him at a completely different light. Just with this powerful speech that Superman gives to Lex Luthor, is that we all are human, we get pushed down, and we make mistakes, but that's what we all have in our society in this current reality today, but especially for what Superman is facing, and that's what makes him his weakness. Crypto just immediately attacks him, and then with Mr. Terrific, that he manages to close the abyss, which is Lex Luthor's black hole that teared open Metropolis, and to immediately close it. And then with Superman, that ends the battle by throwing Ultraman, who is the clone of himself, into the black hole. Basically, Superman saved the day, and basically Metropolis. And with Mr. Terrific and Superman, that they share this hilarious dialogue, which I find it funny. It is so filled with that James Gunn humor, while I tried to keep it like a not so serious story, but an impactful movie as well. So that's what I like about James Gunn and his direction, especially after a final battle in a comic book movie, and that's what I generally like. And then with Lois and Jimmy, that they reveal Lex Luthor's plans, basically not only to the Daily Planet, but to the civilians of Metropolis, and to expose him. Labeled as a traitor, that is immediately arrested, and then everyone goes to cheer and celebrate. And now, just for how I pictured like the third act to go down, I figured like this was amazing and powerful sequences involving flying, and just to stop the invasion, for how Lex Luthor planned for all this to happen. With the ending for how they like set up this movie for an even bigger expansion of James Gunn's DC universe, we get this one last scene with Clark and Lois, or should I say Superman and Lois, and as they go for like an interviewing or something like that. And then it's this last scene of them kissing in the air, just like how I picture a perfect Clark and Lois dynamic to be, and I think it is absolutely perfect of the way that David Corenswet and Rachel Brosnahan really play into their performances. And wow, that's what everything else, for how everything comes to a resolution, for how it is all resolved within each character for what they have come through, and I think it is absolutely brilliant. And then with the last scene, that is with Superman in the fortress still recovering from his injuries, and then we get a cameo from not only then his cousin Kara Zor-El, aka Supergirl, played by Millie Alcock, and that she is looking for Crypto, and also for what this appearance means, that this is obviously setting up Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, the film coming out next year in 2026, and with having her cameo being it obviously makes sense because she is Superman's cousin, and the way that they interact with Crypto and Supergirl, and obviously like he is not nice as he was in the beginning of the movie. That was also foreshadowing for how Crypto really is in the true nature. That's how James Gunn mostly described it. But I liked having like Supergirl in the movie, and it really finds that tone. With the very last moment is with Superman watching a montage of his childhood of his real parents, Martha and Jonathan Kent, and the movie ends from there. And also with my main takeaway from that last scene is that this was basically the conversation he had also with his father, worried of the world of Metropolis that's going to be destroyed, but he learned the very powerful and impactful lesson that his father gave to him before seeing like the news broadcast of Lex Luthor's true rise to power. But it only really sets back into him, into finding that symbol of hope and for what type of reality of the world that we live in, and I think it's just absolutely beautiful. And now with the two post-credit scenes, and now these aren't meant to be like earth-shadowing or total reveals to set up the next project, but the way that James Gunn really laid the foundation for his DC universe, and the way that it is like perfectly laid here, it's just like running gags or something that when I watched these for the first time, I kind of felt like watching the end of a Guardians movie. But just with the first post-credit, that is the mid-credit scene, and as with Superman and Crypto, it is a quick, short scene. It is so cute and heartfelt with the way that Crypto and Superman kind of like feel that tone, and it kind of makes like the audience and the viewer feel that they found joy after watching this movie, and that's why like the world really settles itself in. And then with the post-credit scene, that is at the very end, and that is with Superman and Mr. Terrific kind of looking at like a crack in the concrete on the side of a building, and then they kind of look at it, make like a funny joke, and then the Superman says at the end that he could be a real jerk sometimes, and then it all just ends from there. And I'm kind of glad that they didn't reveal anything too earth-shattering or like type of serious to set up the next project, because even though if you've seen what the MCU has done, they have introduced so many post-credit scenes that lead it into the next project and the next project and the next. But with the way that James Gunn really wants to introduce us his take and his universe, this is his world, and this is all being laid out, and we don't need to see like basically like everything leading into the next project. But no, I think it is all set up perfectly, and with that cameo of Supergirl, it really lays sort of foundation for what we can look forward to next. And I think that's what I generally found beautiful and impactful about this movie alone. And so yeah, that's Superman. I guess with my final thoughts on the entire thing, and I think I generally found joy and hope after watching this movie, specifically with the impactful and beautiful messages that this movie brought in terms of the character of Superman, for what he has profound in the identity of Clark Kent, not only with the characters and everything that's running with the tone, the story, and the visual effects and layout. It's such a beautiful movie, and I think, yeah, I hope you all enjoyed it too as much as I did, especially with everything that went on. And I think James Gunn nailed it, no matter what. And I think many people will find this movie impactful, especially to the viewer as well. So yeah, that's my spoiler review, and I generally liked everything that went down, including towards the end with the final battle, and Lex Luthor was a powerful villain. I generally liked Nicholas Holt's performance in it, and everything that is setting up to expand not only the DC universe, but for what James Gunn has in store for it, what type of characters and stories he has planned next to introduce, which I am all here for as well. But that's gonna do it for this video. Just let me know in the comments down below and know what you think of my spoiler review for the movie, and if you've seen the movie. And just basically let me know your thoughts on Superman and just your opinion on it in general. Let me know 1 out of 10 in the comments down below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to notifications for future videos. And also follow all my social medias, all linked down below. And with that, I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.